Congratulations to Megan H. Megan is the winner of the 2-hour free marketing consultation session with Lisa Fulmar, marketing consultant and senior editor at Craft Foxes. Now, if you would like to promote your Etsy shop or your brand on the podcast by doing a giveaway, please get in touch with me. I put in a lot of effort into the giveaways. I do a lot of promotion for the brand and your Etsy shop, both on the blog and in social media, and then also right here on the podcast too. So if you're interested in partnering with me to help promote your Etsy shop or your creative business or your brand, please email me at interview@convome.com or go to convome.com and use the contact form to connect with me.
Welcome to the Etsy Conversations podcast, featuring inspiring interviews with Etsy shop owners, hosted by Ijama Elazu.
Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of the Etsy Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Ijama, and thank you for joining me on this week's episode. If you need to get a hold of me, I'm on Twitter. You can reach me at Convome Podcast. There's also the Facebook page, Etsy Conversations Podcast. And if you want to jump into a discussion with other Etsy sellers, people who have been on the podcast or are going to be on the podcast, join us in the Etsy Conversations Facebook group. And you can get there. You can search on Facebook for Etsy Conversations in the groups, or you can just go to convome.com/Facebook group. And my guest this week is Mark. Mark runs the Etsy shop Mahogany Rhino, and I'm especially excited to have him on for a particular reason. But before I get into that, hi Mark, and thank you for being my guest.
Hi, Jama. I'm pleased to be here today.
Thank you so much. Can you first tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm a freelance writer. I mostly write for attorneys and law firms, and in my spare time I collect and occasionally sell antique and vintage typewriters.
Nice. And that's exactly why I'm excited to have you on, because it's been just over a year I've been doing this, and you're my first Etsy seller who doesn't actually make what you sell. And so I was happy to have you on, because I haven't had anyone who sells vintage items on the podcast yet. So I enjoy talking about, I am going to enjoy talking about that, because I have some questions around that. So tell us specifically what you sell in your Etsy shop again.
Sure. It's mostly vintage and antique typewriters. Mm-hmm. I think the oldest I'm currently selling is probably from about the 1920s.
Oh, wow.
I have one or two more that I'm going to list within the next couple of weeks that are, I think the oldest was from about 1907. But I have everything up to about the 1970s or 80s.
Wow.
And sometimes I sell the occasional vintage item I come across, like old radios or flip clocks or brass-bladed fans, things like that.
Okay. Now, why Etsy and not eBay? Because I think a lot of people think if they're going to look for something vintage or, really old and not easy to find, eBay might be the first port of call. Why did you pick Etsy?
Well, I started selling on eBay.
Mm-hmm.
I sold a couple of typewriters on eBay. It was fine. The transaction was fine. It was, I listed for buy it now prices and sold them that way. And then I sold one to a guy locally who had found out that I had some vintage typewriters, and he wanted to buy one because his mother had been using a typewriter for most of her life, and her machine recently broke beyond repair. So he wanted a machine that he could give to his mom that she could use to write her Christmas cards and letters and whatever else she used it for. So I met him at a local coffee shop. I brought a couple of typewriters with me. We talked about it. He tried them out. I told him this one has this feature and this one doesn't, but this one is a little more reliable, while this one is a little, more stylish maybe. And, I really like that kind of personal interaction with him. Getting to know what he wanted and trying to find the typewriter that was right for him.
Right.
And, then I remembered Etsy, and I looked around on Etsy, and it seemed like it was something that could offer that more kind of personal interaction. So I started selling them through Etsy, and that's kind of exactly what I found. I had people asking me questions about typewriters, if I could recommend one for them because they needed it for a specific purpose. So that's kind of like so now I only sell through Etsy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a lot more personal.
I think it is. It's it allows you to identify yourself and explain kind of why you're there, and I think people respond to that.
Yeah. Do you find that in your descriptions for the typewriters you sell, you do a lot more personalized types of descriptions, not so much about the specifications, not so technical like you would find like on Amazon?
Well, I try to tailor my descriptions to the people who might buy it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I know that a certain typewriter is going to have different features, mm-hmm. but I find that most of the people who will buy it aren't necessarily going to buy it for that feature. They're going to want something that's vintage or cool or old that they can enjoy as, not just as a thing, but that'll allow them an experience. Mm-hmm. Because, we're all familiar with computers, but mm-hmm. a typewriter is a slightly different experience than using a computer. And people who buy vintage items and who want that experience, they kind of want a little different description than it has this font and these features. They want something that's a little more personalized.
So are all the typewriters you sell always in working condition, or do you ever sell some just more for the aesthetic value?
I try to find machines that are both in working condition and aesthetically pleasing. But if I find a machine that is one or the other, I will sell that and be very clear about why I'm only selling it as, for example, a decorative item. Okay. Right now, I think I'm selling one item that is not entirely functional. I'm only selling it as a decorative item, okay. just because it has some really strong colors. It's like a sage green and a baby blue, and it has this nice kind of like mid-century lines to it. It's a really pretty machine, but it's been neglected and abused, and it's not suitable for someone who wants a working machine.
Oh. Do you also find that people specifically want them for particular reasons when they come to purchase?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I had someone talk to me because November is what's known as National Novel Writing Month, or NaNoWriMo is what the acronym is. Uh-huh. And some people who go into the month thinking, well, I'm going to write a novel, every once in a while they'll want to do it on a typewriter. And so I had several people contact me saying, I'm thinking about doing NaNoWriMo, and can you recommend a typewriter I might be able to use?
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Now, you didn't always sell typewriters. In fact, when you opened your Etsy shop, you had something else in there.
I did. I had this was just kind of on a lark. I had this kind of abstract painting of the Simpsons family that I made one day, and my girlfriend said, "Oh my gosh, you should try to sell it on Etsy." And I said, well, why not? So I put it on Etsy, and no one looked at it, and I didn't sell it. And and then I just kind of forgot about Etsy until about, August, when I had too many typewriters laying around, and I decided to start selling them.
Did the Simpsons painting ever sell?
No, it didn't. It's on my wall. So.
Okay. So you made it for yourself, essentially.
Yeah, if you have something that you like and you're trying to sell it, it's not really a liability if you can't sell it because you still like it.
Right. Do you ever consider offering more paintings in your Etsy shop, or are you now fully just committed to vintage typewriters and other vintage items?
I think If I were to sell typewriters and paintings, that would be a really kind of weird store.
Yes, actually it
Um,
would.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to stick with the typewriters because I'm really a horrible painter, and the painting I did was just blobs of color, so that's about as good as I get.
So when you decided to go back to Etsy, what was your intention? Was it just to do something on the side since you were already working, or did you have any other goals for your Etsy shop?
It was almost just, I was just kind of curious to see if I could sell some of my typewriters through Etsy, because at that point I had around, I would say, a dozen, and I display maybe 3 or 4 in my home at any time, and I might use one to type thank you notes or memos, maybe little to-do lists every once in a while. But they're really, for me, just objects of art. And I didn't need all the typewriters I had, so I thought, well, I can try to sell them through eBay, but I might as well try Etsy while I'm at it.
Yeah.
And then once I started really liking Etsy and was able to develop relationships, or at least have closer relationships with my buyers, I just moved exclusively there.
Okay, I was just about to ask if you're now exclusively on Etsy.
Yeah, I don't list anything anywhere else, just on Etsy.
Okay. So do you have a family, and do they also appreciate your typewriter decor?
Well, my girlfriend, luckily, she likes it.
Oh, good.
And every time people see them, like my sister and her children recently visited they live in Portland. I'm in Kansas City. And my niece was playing around with them, and she's 8 or maybe 9, and so she responded. She was kind of excited that this is a piece of technology she didn't grow up with, and she had almost no experience with, and she got to hear the bell ring once she finished a line, and I think even people who grew up with them still kind of respond, maybe nostalgically, maybe as it's just a piece of technology we're not really around much anymore. So most people seem to like them.
Did your niece make the connection between typewriters and computers? Was she able to make the mental connection about the progress of technology?
Oh yeah, I think the keyboard is fairly obvious. It's the same QWERTY layout, the QWERTY, which is the first 6 letters of the keyboard. Yeah, that's the same, and that has been the same, with the exception that the older typewriters don't have a number 1. The number row starts at number 2, and to use the number 1, you have to use the lowercase l.
Really?
So, yeah. A lot of people are really surprised by that. They'll look at the keyboard and say, "Oh, where's the 1?" And you have to tell them, "Well, you have to use the L to get the 1." So she asked that question, and I thought that was kind of cute. A lot of people. It's kind of maybe 2 steps removed from a computer. There's enough there to be familiar with it, but you still have a little learning curve to try to use one if you've never used one before.
Okay. Now I'm just curious as to why they thought not putting the 1 was, I guess it saved space. 1 key.
Yeah, it's space, and the keys, each individual key has its own. It has several pieces. There's an arm, and there are several springs. Okay. And the fewer pieces you have, the less complicated the machine is. And I imagine there's a cost factor there as well. I don't know precisely why they didn't include the 1. Some of the older typewriters, the very old ones, will only have 3 rows of keys. There are different typewriters that have completely different layouts than the keyboards we're used to. So.
How did you educate yourself about typewriters?
It came one piece at a time, and I'm still learning. Still learning something every day about them. A couple years ago, I had kind of gotten the idea that I wanted a typewriter to have as something to display, and I bought one. Oh, I think the first one I really bought was It was a Royal KMM that I purchased in May of this year.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of beat up. It was taken from someone's farm or someone's barn, and I found it at an antique shop, and the guy wanted $20 for it, so I bought it. And as I was cleaning it and researching it, I, started finding more things out about them and started learning about other machines. And, I probably still look at typewriter websites every day, I would guess.
There are typewriter websites?
There are typewriter websites. There are typewriter, Facebook pages.
Oh, wow.
I even found out that there is a still functioning typewriter repair shop in my city.
No way.
Yep. I was shocked to find that out, but
Are there meetups for people who like to use typewriters or are interested in typewriters? That would be the ultimate.
There actually are.
No.
They call them, they have a special word for them. They call them type-ins. Like a sit-in, but a type-in.
Right.
And you either bring your typewriter with you, or you have, there are typewriters there that you can use, and you just sit around typing and talking about typewriters, I imagine. I've never been to one, so I don't know, but I know they exist.
Wow. So interesting. Now, so you're working full-time and you're running your Etsy shop. How do you manage your time?
Most of my work, I work for myself, and I normally work out of my home.
Okay.
So I have a flexibility when it comes to arranging my schedule. Sometimes I'm busier than other times, and when I have a lot of work, I don't have a lot of time to devote to the Etsy store. But normally I will work in the mornings and afternoons. In the evenings, I will clean the typewriter or get it ready to take photographs the next day at lunch. Maybe I'll write a description and copy edit it before I post it.
Mm-hmm.
But I try to spend a little time each day doing some work on it.
Okay. How do you source them?
Sourcing is difficult.
I would imagine.
Mm-hmm. I occasionally post ads on my local Craigslist.
Okay.
I found some through there. I found some through online auctions. I've gone to auctions in my area and found a lot of items that way. I occasionally go to an estate sale. I'll pop by a garage sale every once in a while, but that's really not an efficient way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Just a couple weeks ago, I took my first road trip specifically to find typewriters.
Whoa.
Yeah, I drove about 2.5 hours away to Omaha, Nebraska, where I found 6. So that was productive.
Did you know where you were going when you headed out to Omaha?
I did.
Okay.
There was a seller there who was selling 4 of them.
Okay.
And 3 of them I really wanted because they were machines that I hadn't had and I knew were collectible.
Okay.
And then while I was in Omaha, I was able to find 2 others.
Excellent. Do you ever fear that the time might come when you don't find any more, since they are finite, essentially?
They are finite, but, the typewriter was the primary piece of word processing technology for almost 100 years. I just contacted a guy earlier today about a typewriter he was selling, and it was the first typewriter I actually bought, called the Royal KMM. That one was made starting in the late 30s, and it was made up to about 1948, and they made 7 million of those.
Whoa.
And that was just one model. So there are millions and millions of these machines that were made, and there are still a lot of them around. So I don't have a lot of worries when it comes to finding new ones.
Okay. You must, there has to be an element of enjoying scavenging and hunting for these that comes with this.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I remember once I was at a local thrift store, and I was just walking through the aisles, and a couple aisles across, I saw a typewriter case. And I immediately knew the exact kind of typewriter that was inside it, and I was hoping that it was. It's called an Olympia SM7.
Mm-hmm.
It was a typewriter that was made in West Germany in the mid-'60s, and Olympias are regarded as one of the most well-made machines, typewriters ever made.
Wow.
And inside was a practically perfect machine. So I picked it up and I went to the cashier, and he rang me up, but the case was closed. So, and he was a young kid, so I just kind of, as I was about to leave, I asked him, "You know what this is?" And he said no. And so I turn it around, I open it up, and as soon as I open it up, his eyes got real big, and he got real excited about it, and it was just cool. I showed him how it worked and everything.
Oh, that is, I can't believe that.
Yeah, it's really fun when something like that happens.
Yeah. I feel there's a book inside you about vintage typewriters.
Who knows? I'm in the middle of a book right now, and so
see, I knew it.
If there is one, it's not about typewriters.
Oh, okay.
If there is one, it's probably somewhere down the road. Maybe there's a typewriter book to be had. Who knows?
Yeah, there's obviously a community, and there's a world of people now who know nothing. So, and it's fascinating.
Yeah, that's one of the things I like most about it is, finding someone who, maybe had one a long time ago, or someone who's not experienced them, and then they kind of find out the joy that there is a distinct joy to be had with them.
Yeah. Is your Etsy shop profitable yet?
Yes, it was profitable fairly quickly. The machines I find, usually I can find them at a significantly lower price than the price at which I sell them. I try to make sure, like I said, that they're all functional. I know as I've been finding them and restoring them, I keep learning. I keep learning new things. I learn how to fix small problems. I learn how to properly clean them and make sure that they are operating as they should. So it was surprising to me at how easily they sold at the prices I'm selling them. But I'm pleased that all my buyers are happy with their purchases too.
That's good. Now, so your shop got profitable really quickly. And in order to actually assess that, you have to really know your numbers. Did you have any special system that you had in place to keep track so that you could tell what your expenses and losses and profits were?
Yeah, absolutely. I keep a basic spreadsheet. For my business, I use QuickBooks, but I figured for the Etsy shop, I wasn't going to get that complicated, so I just keep a basic spreadsheet with all the inventory items and expenses, and I have my balance sheet that will automatically tabulate where I am profitability-wise. Okay. I keep my receipts in a separate file folder, and I keep everything organized.
Okay, excellent. And I think that's really, and I wanted to bring that up because I think that's extremely important. Sometimes when people sell, especially online, they're not very good about tracking the numbers as you would if you had like a physical shop. And that's the only way to know if all your time and effort is actually paying off or if really it's just a glorified hobby.
Absolutely. I mean, you can easily sell something and say, "Oh, I just made, $20 or $30." Right. But if you didn't keep track of the $5 you spent on shipping materials and the time you spent driving to pick something up and the time you spent or the items you had to purchase in order to make that $20, that's, if you're doing it as a hobby, great. If you love it, great. But if you're doing it as a business, you have to know what the numbers are telling you.
Very much so. So sometimes I always like to ask my guests what inspires them to create, but you're not creating, but still, obviously you have some inspiration that draws you to the typewriters. What is that?
I was drawn to them originally just as kind of objects of art, objects of antiquated machinery, maybe. I remember using them when I was in school, when I was very young. That gave way to computers. And just having them around is a different kind of, it has that industrial look to it. Some of them have a more modern look. Some of them have a antique look. and I just kind of like them as things to look at. Things to use, it's nice to have that option as well, but I primarily use them as decorative pieces. So I kind of respond to the aesthetics of it, the colors, the design elements. The noises are nice, you know. They can kind of fill the room up with a sound, so that's nice to have too.
Do you ever have buyers who ask for help using the machines, and do you offer that kind of help, like if they just want to get familiarized with what they're about to buy?
Yeah, I've had people who wanted to know, who have very specific questions about like the typewriters they're considering. I had one potential buyer who wanted to know the specific serial number of a machine because it was an IBM Selectric. And they introduced that machine in the early 60s, and once they did, it just dominated the electric typewriter market. There was almost no other competition after the Selectric came about. So the earlier Selectrics have been around for a long time and tend to have more problems than the later Selectrics. That particular buyer wanted to know if it was an earlier or later machine. I've had other people ask me, you know, I'm thinking about a typewriter, what should I look for? Or I'm thinking about one as a gift. What kind do you think would be best? Those kinds of questions I get a lot.
Okay. Do you know if there are other Etsy shops that sell typewriters or things similar to what you might pick up to sell? And do you ever spend time looking at what they have to offer?
Yeah, that was one of the first things I did before I started selling on Etsy, was to see if there was competition. If so, what their prices were, and if they were making any sales, because I didn't really want to start selling something without, you know, knowing if there was a market to support it. So yeah, I researched my competition fairly thoroughly before I started selling, and I selected prices that I felt were competitive without trying to undercut myself too much. And so every once in a while, if I find a new machine that I don't really know what the price might be, I'll look to see what other people might have. But I don't check out a lot of competition on a regular basis now.
Do you do any pricing research on eBay as well?
Yeah, eBay prices are significantly lower on typewriters.
Really?
Yeah. You can find typewriters. I've probably sold the same model on Etsy for twice as much as I might sell it on eBay.
Okay.
And again, I think it's because of that personal connection. When someone can contact me and ask about a specific machine, about my experience with it, what I think about it, you know, I think that adds value.
Okay. Do you think the typewriter market is saturated?
It could be. I don't know. I'm part of a couple of groups of collectors that discuss typewriters every once in a while. I don't know if there's a surge in interest recently. I kind of keep track of Google Trends to see if there's a spike in typewriters. The last spike I saw was when Tom Hanks wrote an article for the New York Times. Apparently he's a very big typewriter collector, and he wrote about his experience with and passion for typewriters. And that was the last big spike I saw. But in general, typewriter searches are fairly low. Is the market saturated? It might be. I don't know if I have enough experience or expertise to say one way or the other.
Okay. So far, since you've been selling actively on Etsy, have you had any bad experiences or had to deal with any negative feedback or disputes?
No, not yet. I recently sold a machine to a buyer out in New Mexico. It was an electric typewriter. He purchased it. I tested it. I test all the machines before I sell them. It was working fine. Apparently that once it got to him, it developed a problem. So I told him if he had a typewriter repair shop in his town, take it there to see what the cost would be. We agreed. We ended up agreeing to split the cost of repair, and he just contacted me earlier this week saying that it's back into fine shape, and he was really happy about it. So no, that wasn't a problem, but I was actually really happy we got it to work because it was a really cool machine.
Yeah, that's good. That I think it's nice. One of the trends I hear when people do have issues with items they sell and buyers, most people just seem willing to work something out because it's something they want anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're going to spend $300 for a typewriter, you want it to work,
Yeah.
or at least if you want a working machine. And I want it to work too, because I think, you know, that's what you're buying. So why wouldn't you get a working machine? So I had no problem in making sure that he got the typewriter he wanted.
Yeah. Now, has selling on Etsy changed your life in any way, would you say?
I think I watch less TV. Well, I barely watch TV as it is, but
Yeah.
if I have spare time, I'm just usually looking for typewriters to buy or repairing the ones I have. So yeah, I spend a lot more time around antiquated technology now.
Nice. It gets you away from the screen, huh?
Yeah, it does. I don't have to look at a computer screen when I'm cleaning a typewriter.
Do you ever use the ones that you get?
I do. I test each one out after I clean it and restore it.
Okay.
And whenever I sell one, I write a thank you note with a typewriter.
Nice.
And yeah, so that's kind of fun.
Now let's talk about how you promote your Etsy shop. What do you do to get the word out and get the word out about your shop and generate I would think that if someone is already looking for a typewriter, they're already excited. So you don't really have to do too much to get them more excited. But how do you promote your shop?
I don't do very much at all. Mostly I try to write descriptions that have SEO strategies, that I use SEO strategies to make sure the copy is good, that there's a keyword density, that I'm using the right keywords, and I'll research those using Google.
Mm-hmm.
I think I paid one guy on Fiverr to, I don't know, get more views for my shop or my listings, and that he did that for a while, and it seemed to be all right. I don't know if that ended up in more sales, but it was $5, so why not?
Mm-hmm.
I have a Pinterest account that I almost never use. Sometimes I use Instagram. I think I have a Facebook page. But yeah, that's about it.
Dare I even ask about Twitter?
Yeah, I know how to spell Twitter. So.
Funny. Now, how did you pick the Fiverr guy?
I went to Fiverr. I typed in, help me sell my Etsy items or something like that.
Okay.
And his was like first on my search results. So I said, here's $5 and see what you can do. So,
Do you know what specifically he did? Did he tweet about it? Did he blog about it?
I have no idea, but I do know that my daily views went from about 60 to 100 up to maybe, I think at one point I was getting over 1,000 views a day.
No way.
Yeah, but was that a bot? You know, was that some...
Yeah, that's true.
You know, I have no way of telling. You know, again, did it contribute to sales? I don't know.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I know there are a lot of Etsy gigs on Fiverr, I see.
Mm-hmm.
I see. So I would guess social media is not that important to your shop.
Yeah, if I could figure out a way to, I only have about 20 typewriters in stock right now. I have about 6 more that I'm going to sell. So if I got crazy on social media and started selling one a day, I'd probably be out of business pretty quick.
Yeah.
Because I just can't find enough, to keep them in stock if I'm selling that many.
Yeah. What about your own website? Do you have one?
I have one for my business, my day job.
Okay.
But I don't have one for my Etsy shop. Thought about starting one, but I haven't taken that step.
If you do start one, what would you want to use it for? Blogging, writing about typewriters, or just another sales channel?
The Etsy fees are so insignificant. I think they're about 2 or 3%.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I would need it as a sales channel. I would probably use it as a separate place to discuss typewriters. I know that there are a lot of people in the community who have questions about repairs and keeping or bringing a neglected machine back into shape, and I might use it for that purpose. But I kind of blog for a living. I ghostwrite a lot of blogs. So I don't know if I would start a new blog. That would seem like too much work.
Okay, so now you write for attorneys, you said earlier?
Yeah, mostly I write for law firms, legal publishers, and the occasional marketing firm.
Do they have blogs?
They do. A lot of law firms will use blogs as a way to not only attract new clients, but to keep their current clients informed of important information or events.
Oh, interesting. Okay, but I digress. So between Etsy and your other business, how much time does your shop take each week, approximately?
It depends. If I don't have much time to devote to it, I might not spend more than an hour or two each week.
Okay.
If I have an order, it takes a lot to ship a typewriter, so that an order will take an hour to package correctly and to drop off at FedEx or the post office. If I have time, I could easily spend 10 hours or more. If I'm going to an auction, I can spend 4 or 5 hours at an auction just waiting for the typewriter to come up.
Actually, I'm glad you brought up shipping, because that's one thing I wanted to ask you about. So how do you manage shipping and packaging of the typewriters? Because I assume most of them don't come in boxes that you can easily just package, and you have to protect the equipment.
You have to be very careful. Some of these typewriters can be 30 pounds or more, and they have moving pieces. The carriage can move, the keys can move. So they can be easily damaged if you're not careful. The lighter typewriters are easy to ship. Bubble wrap, wrapping them in the right size box with enough cushioning material for the lighter machines is usually enough. For the heavier machines, it takes multiple layers of wrap. It takes an individually fitted box that I have to cut down and kind of shape to fit over the machine. And that's after you isolate all the moving parts and make sure everything is cushioned, so that even if something does move, it's not going to bang into something else.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I was curious about that because, I would imagine wrapping them up is more involved than. Yeah,
it can take 30 minutes up to an hour to package the machine.
Okay. Wow. So let's talk about relationships and connections. Do you feel that you've made some good ones on Etsy in the time that you've been selling?
I haven't been selling long, but
okay.
I think I've spoken to several people who, about typewriters, that they've been very appreciative of the advice I've been able to give. I've met a couple of collectors who I've been able to talk with about typewriters. I've found some online communities that have the same bent on finding typewriters and talking about them. So, I never would have met these people had I not started doing this. So,
right.
I think definitely.
Now, before opening your Etsy shop, was there anything in particular, or were there any things specifically that you did to set yourself up for success? Because I know you started just kind of out of curiosity, but when you decided you were going to do this, did you come in with a different mindset and a plan?
Well, I knew that I didn't want to be casual about it. I didn't want to just put something out there and not have, a chance at being successful. Because if there was a chance of it working, I wanted it to be able to do that. So I spent a lot of time looking at other Etsy stores, especially the more successful ones, trying to figure out what they were doing. I found out I researched how to take photos. I spent a lot of time kind of toying or playing around with the descriptions I wrote. I write a lot of content for the web, so I'm fairly familiar with SEO principles, but I didn't, have the voice of the narrator that's telling you about each of these items, and I worked a little to get that. Because whenever you write something on the web, you have to kind of write in a voice that the reader is going to identify with, or at least be comfortable with. You don't want to talk over the heads of your reader, but you don't want to pander or assume that they're not going to understand what you're talking about. So talking in a conversational, personalized tone, I felt was important. And then as I acquired more items and started getting a visual aesthetic, I wanted to keep that throughout each of the new listings I had. And so right now I think I have a mold that I can apply to each of the items I find.
Okay. Do you find yourself telling more stories about the item?
I like to start with a story. I like to allow a potential buyer to understand where this thing came from, because a lot of these typewriters have been around for 50, 60, 100 years or more. And, people have owned it in that time, and it's been part of a life. It's been part of maybe a dozen lives. And I like to give a potential reader the idea that is what they're buying. It's not a piece of it's not just a thing. It's almost a piece of someone's personal life or personal history. And, I bought a machine about 2 months ago that I have yet to list, and it was just so encased in nicotine residue that when I put a degreaser on it, the paper that I put underneath, the mat underneath, became red with it. It was almost like a blood coming off this machine, and it was such a striking color. I took a photo of it and sent it out on Instagram, but it was, that was a century of buildup, of smoke buildup that had been there. Yeah.
Nicotine?
Nicotine residue. It's this kind of like bright brownish red. It's really, really strong color.
Then does something like that affect the internal mechanisms, like the internal pieces of the machine? And is that something you tell whoever is going to buy it?
Oh, it can. Yeah, absolutely. If a machine has been neglected for a long time, if a typewriter hasn't been regularly lubricated or maintained, there can be any number of problems that will stop it from operating correctly. Most commonly, the rollers, the what we call the platens, they're hard because they're rubber, so they've oxidized over the years.
Right.
And a hard platen will mean that when you strike a key against it when you're typing, it'll kind of create a little divot, a little impression. Some of them can be so hard that when you type the number 0 or the letter O, it'll actually cut out a circle in the paper. So there'll be a hole in the paper where you type it. Yeah.
Funny. Wow. Would you say there's any lesson that you've learned while you've been selling on Etsy the hard way?
Not yet. I'm very careful to be as accurate as possible with my descriptions. I don't want anyone to get something and say, "Oh, well, you didn't tell me about this," because these are antique machines, and a problem can develop at almost any time. They're not making them anymore, and there's no way to find an identical replacement. They're all unique by this point. So I want to describe each in a unique fashion to give a potential buyer an idea exactly what I'm selling.
Okay. Now, this one is just a general survey question I like to ask. I have no pull over whether or not it will get implemented, but as far as Etsy goes, are there any features that you don't currently see on the site that you think would be beneficial?
I was just thinking about this the other day. I would like the chance to have a link or a video option, or a link to a video, because I'm selling practical machines that you can use, and I would like to show customers, here's a video of this typewriter in action. This is what you get. And I think a lot of my buyers would respond to that if they can see the machine in action, if they can hear it in action. The audible quality of these typewriters is quite striking a lot of the times, and that would be a nice feature to add. Yeah.
I'm so pro video. I think it would just revolutionize how sellers sell on Etsy.
And again, it's more of a personal kind of interaction. You can see it in real life instead of just a still image.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for someone who is new to Etsy or who is considering selling on Etsy?
I'm a part of the Etsy subreddit. I'm on Reddit. I don't know if you know that.
Do I ever? I love Reddit.
Okay, so I'm on the Etsy subreddit, and there are a lot of times when people will get on there and post a question about, here's my shop. Will you give me the critique?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, I'm not a photographer. I don't know much about lighting or composition, but I do know when their descriptions fall flat. And when you have a really cool looking item and you're just giving a bare bones description of materials and color, that's not going to do it for me. I want to know why you bothered to make this thing. Mm-hmm. What made you want to do that? What personal what part of your personality did you bring into this creation, and why do I as a buyer want that? If you can create that through what you write, I think that helps.
Yeah.
If you take the time to explain to your buyers, to your potential customers, why you're passionate about this, then I think they respond.
Yeah. I fully agree with you. I wrote something just basically saying that I think Etsy is different in that as far when compared to other e-commerce platforms, in that you can bring your personality, and because it's something that you're making usually, or it's an item that has a backstory, people who shop on Etsy, I feel, want to hear that story. I want to hear it when I'm shopping on Etsy.
Absolutely. I mean, there are 1 million, 2 million, who knows how many eBay users there are, and they come and go every day. Mm-hmm. But when you have an Etsy store and you have the ability to identify yourself and tell your buyers, this is what I'm doing, this is why I'm doing it. Mm-hmm. You don't have to worry that I'm going to, go away tomorrow. They like that. I like that. I like knowing that I'm buying something from someone who's doing it because they want to do it, not just because they're in it for the money.
Yeah, it's a part of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's something you would say that you're doing right now that seems to be working really well for you?
I'm averaging maybe 1 or 2 sales a week, so I don't know if I can say if I'm doing really well. But the items I'm selling are somewhat higher dollar. Mm-hmm. I think I'm taking good photos. Okay. I think I'm using my tags and I think I'm using SEO techniques well. Every once in a while I'll catch a typo, so I'm not copy editing as much as I should be. But I think I like my descriptions. I like the way I've set up each of my items and what a buyer can take away when they look at my stuff.
Yes. Again, Mark's shop is Mahogany Rhino. I'm going to have links to his Etsy shop. I encourage you to go and take a look at the typewriters and take a stroll down memory lane and read Mark's descriptions. He's really good about telling you about what he's selling, but then there's a story to it. And you can kind of tell that you're a writer. When I read your writing, I'm like, yeah, he is a writer. It comes through. Mark, what's the best way people can reach you if they want to get in touch with you?
Just contact me through the Etsy store. Send me a conversation? Is that what they call it? Yeah, send me that. I have an Etsy app on my phone, and I usually respond within 10, 15 minutes at the latest.
Okay. Mark, thank you so much for being my guest on the podcast. I really enjoyed talking to you. Like I said, I've wanted to talk to someone who sells vintage items, and typewriters are obviously more fascinating than I ever thought. So thank you for sharing about that.
It was absolutely my pleasure.
And I will be back next week. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening. You can subscribe to the podcast in iTunes, and while you're there, please leave a review too. Visit convome.com to leave a comment or feedback on this episode.